The Panzer commander's hands trembled on the radio set. 3 kilometers ahead, through morning mist, lay what intelligence called light resistance. He didn't believe it anymore. June 1944, Normandy hedgerows. His Tiger tank, all 56 tons of German engineering, sat motionless in a country lane barely wider than its hull. Behind him, 7 more Panzers, elite crews, veterans of Poland, France, Russia. Dead. All dead within 90 seconds. The first Sherman appeared on his left flank, impossible angle, firing the British 17-pounder. The round punched through his Tiger side armor like paper. Then aircraft, American P-47 Thunderbolts screaming down at tree level. His radio man was screaming too, but the words dissolved in the roar of rocket fire. Stay with this story. Because 3 years earlier, this same commander had raced 300 kilometers in 4 days across France. The French couldn't stop him. The British ran. His Panzer division sliced through defensive lines like they weren't there. Radio coordination, speed, concentration of force. The principles that made Germany unstoppable. Infantry Captain Hans Weber watched from a foxhole 200 meters away. He'd been at Kursk, seen different mathematics. The Soviets had taught him that attackers bleed when defenders think in layers, not lines. Now the Americans learned the same lesson. The Tiger commander never made it out, but his final radio transmission reached headquarters. They changed the rules. Movement is death. Air owns everything. We can't. Static. What happened between 1940 and 1944? How did the same tactical doctrine that conquered Poland in 27 days become a suicide pact in Normandy? The answer isn't just technology. It's one fundamental principle the Allies discovered, a rule so devastatingly simple that it turned the most brilliant armored tactics in military history into a death sentence. And it started 300 kilometers deep in the Russian steppe.
September 1st, 1939. German panzers crossed the Polish border at 04:45. By September 27th, Poland had ceased to exist as a functioning state. 27 days. The Wehrmacht fielded roughly 2,700 tanks against Poland's outdated cavalry divisions and 880 tanks. But numbers weren't the story. Doctrine was. General Heinz Guderian had spent the 1930s developing what foreign journalists would label blitzkrieg, though no German manual ever used that term. The concept: concentrate mechanized forces at weak points, pierce enemy lines, drive deep into rear areas before defenders can coordinate response. Radio technology made it possible. The standard Panzer III carried a radio in every tank. Polish commanders still relied on telephone lines and motorcycle couriers. By the time Polish generals learned where German spearheads were, those spearheads had moved 50 kilometers. Engineer Fritz Müller sat in a Berlin design office examining reports. The Panzer III, primary German medium tank in 1939, mounted only a 37mm gun and 30mm frontal armor. Pathetic compared to what was coming. But it was fast, 40 kilometers an hour on roads. And there were hundreds of them, all talking to each other, all moving together. Here's what terrified Allied intelligence officers. Only 15% of the Wehrmacht was actually mechanized. 15%. The rest marched on foot like Napoleon's army. Yet this thin armored tip shattered 3 nations in 9 months. Poland in 27 days, Denmark in 6 hours, Norway in 2 months, France, which had more and better tanks than Germany, in 6 weeks. The industrial constraint was crushing. Germany couldn't afford a long war. They had to win fast, win decisively, or lose everything. The Soviet Union sat to the east with 24,000 tanks, more than the rest of the world combined. Time was the enemy. Speed was survival. And for 3 years, the Panzers had both. Until they didn't.
Heer Waffenamt Weapons Testing Facility, Kummersdorf, 1933. The sound of metal grinding metal. Young engineer Hans Otters watched the prototype Panzer I lurch forward on steel tracks. Barely a tank, more like a tractor with armor plates welded on. 2 machine guns, no cannon. But it moved, and movement was the point. The Treaty of Versailles had forbidden Germany from building tanks, so German engineers trained with cardboard cutouts on automobile chassis. They studied every World War I failure: static trenches, breakthrough attempts that bogged down in mud and barbed wire, advancements measured in meters, paid for in thousands of lives. General Hans von Seeckt had demanded something different: wars of movement, not attrition. He'd written in 1926, "Mobility is the essence of modern warfare." But how? Guderian read everything: British tank theorist J.F.C. Fuller, Soviet deep battle doctrine, French mechanized warfare studies. Everyone was asking the same question: how do you break through modern defenses? Most answers were wrong. The French built the Maginot Line, the ultimate static defense, impregnable fortifications along the German border. Cost? Billions of francs. Tanks? Dispersed among infantry units as support weapons. The British had better ideas but couldn't decide. They designed excellent tanks. Matilda II had armor no German gun could penetrate in 1940, but kept them separated from infantry, artillery, air support. Germany had the worst tanks, but the best doctrine. Testing began in secret at Soviet facilities in Kazan. Under Stalin's nose, German tankers learned to coordinate. Not individual tanks, not even companies, entire divisions moving as one organism. Panthers protected Tigers, infantry followed in half-track Hanomaks, artillery self-propelled on tank chassis, Stukas overhead as flying artillery. Engineer testimonies from 1938 describe 16-hour days redesigning radio systems. The Fug 5 radio set could transmit 4 kilometers, enough for battalion coordination. One prototype exploded, killed 2 testers. They rebuilt it by morning, because war was coming, and someone would solve mobility first.
May 10th, 1940. Belgian border village of Eppen. French Lieutenant Pierre Moreau heard them before he saw them, a grinding roar like continuous thunder. Then the trees exploded, not from artillery, from massed tank fire. 70 Panzers appeared from the Ardennes Garst. His commanding officer had assured him, tanks can't cross the Ardennes, the forest is impassable. 7 Panzer divisions had just crossed. Moreau's company held a strong position: concrete bunkers, artillery support, anti-tank guns, everything doctrine required. Then Stuka dive bombers screamed down in near-vertical dives. The sirens mounted on their landing gear, Jericho trumpets, created psychological terror before a single bomb fell. The concrete exploded. His radio died. The French artillery battalion 8 kilometers behind him had received no orders. French command doctrine required authorization from division headquarters for fire missions. By the time the authorization came, the Panzers were already past Moreau's position. His after-action report, written in a British POW camp: "We were brave, we were ready, but they moved faster than our decision cycle." In the chaos, Wehrmacht Panzer Lieutenant Hans Steiner saw French tanks appear, big, heavily armored Char B1s. Their 60mm armor couldn't be penetrated by his Panzer III's 37mm gun. He radioed for air support. 8 minutes later, Stukas bracketed the French tanks with 500-kilogram bombs. The first week of the French campaign, German casualties 10,000 killed, 42,000 wounded. French casualties 55,000 killed, 120,000 wounded, 1.9 million captured. Allied commanders couldn't comprehend the speed. Defensive plans assumed 15 kilometers of advance per day, World War I tempo. The Panzers moved 60 kilometers on good days. British General Edmund Ironside wrote in his diary May 15th, "The Germans have broken through. Nobody seems to know where anything is." Intelligence officer Klaus Weber examined captured French operational maps. Beautiful, detailed plans, all worthless. The French had prepared to fight 1918 again. Germany had invented 1940, and the terror had only begun.
Moscow, December 1941. Soviet General Georgy Zhukov stood over maps showing German spearheads 30 kilometers from the Kremlin. Operation Barbarossa had broken everything in its path. 3 million German soldiers, 3,350 tanks, 600,000 vehicles, the largest invasion force in human history, slicing through Soviet defenses like they were theoretical exercises. Minsk, captured in 1 week. Smolensk, 2 weeks. Kiev, largest encirclement in military history, 600,000 Soviet soldiers captured. The Panzer doctrine had evolved. Where France saw 7 Panzer divisions, the Soviet Union faced 21. Panzer Group Guderian alone controlled more armor than the entire French campaign. And now they understood deep operations, not just breakthrough, but strategic exploitation. Wehrmacht officers wrote in war diaries about advances so rapid that infantry couldn't keep up.
Panzer spearheads operate 150 kilometers ahead of their own supply lines. Soviet units, surrounded and cut off, fought in pockets while German armor raced toward Moscow. Then winter came. Mud first, the Rasputitsa, the season of impassable roads. Tanks designed for European highways sank to their hulls in Russian mud. Mechanics reported transmissions failing, track pins shearing, engines freezing. The T-34 had wider tracks, better ground pressure. Soviet tanks kept moving. But the strategic pattern held: concentration, breakthrough, encirclement. Soviet losses were catastrophic, over 3 million casualties by December. Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov, intelligence officer, Central Front, was recording patterns in a bunker outside Moscow. German doctrine required momentum. Stop them and they lost everything. The problem: Soviet armies kept trying to stop panzers with single defensive lines. Volkov wrote in his report, "They must exhaust themselves in depth. We give them distance, but not victory." His superiors ignored him. They would remember 18 months later, because at a place called Kursk, the Soviet Union would build the deepest defensive system in military history, and the panzers would break themselves trying to pierce it. The mathematics were about to change.
July 5, 1943, 0430. Kursk Salient, Southern Sector. Waffen-SS Panzer Commander Kurt Meyer's Tiger tank lurched forward through the pre-dawn darkness. Behind him, 200 more tanks, Panthers, Tigers, Panzer IVs. The finest armored formation Germany had ever assembled. Intelligence said light defenses, 15 kilometers to break through. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The first mine detonated under his lead Panther at 0442. The explosion blew the right track completely off. The tank slew sideways, blocking the cleared lane. Engineers scrambled forward to clear another path. Soviet artillery found them immediately. Katyusha rockets, Stalin's organs, screamed down in salvos, the sound like freight trains colliding. Meyer's driver screamed into the intercom. They knew exactly where we'd attack. They did. Through the gun sights, Meyer saw the second defensive belt. Not a line, a belt, 3 kilometers deep. Dug-in T-34s acting as assault guns, anti-tank ditches wide enough to swallow a Tiger, and everywhere, more mines. His gunner fired. A Soviet anti-tank position vanished in flame, then another. The 88mm gun was superb. But for every position destroyed, 3 more opened fire. Radio chatter devolved into chaos. Panther Company halted, minefields. Air support, where's the Luftwaffe? Breakthrough impossible, request orders. Soviet Air Force IL-2 Sturmoveks appeared overhead. Slow, ugly ground attack aircraft. In 1941, they'd been target practice. Now German fighters were busy elsewhere. The IL-2s made methodical runs, dropping PTAB anti-tank bomblets. By noon, Meyer's battalion had advanced 9 kilometers. They'd lost 40% of their tanks. And ahead, barely visible through dust and smoke, lay the third defensive belt. A young grenadier vomited beside Meyer's tank, not from fear, from mathematics. They'd prepared for 30 kilometers to break through. Soviet intelligence revealed 8 defensive belts. Total depth, 300 kilometers. At this rate of loss, they'd be annihilated before penetrating 50. Meyer radioed battalion, request permission to halt and regroup. Denied. Attack. Always attack. Until nothing remains.
The engineering behind the defensive revolution. Soviet military engineers had calculated precise numbers. An advancing tank covers roughly 2 square meters of ground per meter of travel. A TM-41 anti-tank mine contains 5.5 kilograms of TNT, enough to destroy tracks, damage wheels, immobilize any tank. The mathematics: 1,500 mines per kilometer of front equals 1 mine every 66 centimeters. A Panzer IV is 5.92 meters wide. Probability of mine strike per kilometer, 95%. The Germans deployed WW2 remote-controlled mine-clearing vehicles. These 3.5-ton robots could detonate mines ahead of advancing tanks. Problem: they had no marking system. Cleared lanes were invisible. Tanks following WW2s still hit mines. Soviet engineers had embedded wooden-cased mines. German metal detectors, designed for steel-cased mines, couldn't detect them. The Kursk region's iron-rich soil scrambled detector readings anyway. Clearing mines manually under artillery fire, average time to confirm and clear 1 square meter, 4 minutes. With 1,500 mines per kilometer and a 20-kilometer attack frontage, theoretical clearance time, 53 days. The German solution: accept losses, drive through. Some tanks would be disabled, others would break through.
The Soviets had anticipated this. Behind the minefields, pack 40 75mm anti-tank guns in concealed positions, effective range 1,800 meters. The guns were positioned at precisely calculated fields of fire, creating overlapping kill zones. When Panzers slowed in minefields, anti-tank guns engaged at leisure. German sources report Verdun tank destroyers, virtually indestructible from the front, lost 37 of 45 vehicles to mine damage on the first day. The 88mm gun could kill any Soviet tank at 2,000 meters, but immobilized by mines, Verduns became stationary targets for artillery. The Panther tank, Germany's answer to the T-34, suffered transmission failures at Kursk, rate 25%. The tanks were rushed into production, not enough testing, gearboxes overheated under combat conditions. Soviet T-34-76, simpler, less capable, but mechanically reliable and present in overwhelming numbers. Engineering won wars. Germany had superior designs. The Soviets had superior numbers and doctrine. Numbers times doctrine equals annihilation.
Letters from the Kursk battlefield reveal the psychological collapse. Oberlieutenant Friedrich Sander, Grossdeutschland Division, July 7, 1943. We advance 500 meters and lose 3 tanks. Extract them under fire. Advance another 500 meters. More mines, more casualties. The men are exhausted. Not from fear, from futility. We're grinding ourselves down against an enemy who won't break. Soviet soldier Ivan Kozlov, 6th Guards Army, recorded different emotions. They came with tigers and panthers, beautiful machines. We watched them from our trenches, mine-cleared lanes marked with surveyor precision. Our orders, let them enter the kill zone, wait. Then artillery coordinates arrived. We destroyed them not with heroism, but with mathematics. The psychological advantage had reversed. 1940, German tank crews felt invincible. French positions crumbled. Speed and surprise created panic. Defenders broke and ran. 1943, German tankers understood their armor couldn't save them. Mines didn't care about Tiger tanks' 100mm frontal armor. Artillery could disable any tank. And Soviet infantry, armed with Molotov cocktails and magnetic mines, crawled through grain fields at night, hunting immobilized German vehicles. SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, who would become the highest-scoring tank ace, wrote in a report, "Crew morale declines with each kilometer. They understand we're attacking into a system designed specifically to destroy us." For Soviet defenders, the psychology was different. Civilian Nadezhda Volkova, conscripted as trench digger. "We dug for 2 months, 18-hour days. My hands bled. But when the Germans attacked, when I heard their tanks detonating in our minefields, I understood. Every shovelful of earth, every mine we placed, we were building their grave." POW interviews reveal German soldiers suffered acute stress not from combat intensity, but from tactical helplessness. They couldn't maneuver, couldn't use their training, just advanced into prepared killing zones. Soviet psychiatric reports noted opposite effect. Defenders in prepared positions reported lower combat stress than in mobile operations. Defense in depth created psychological as well as tactical advantage. The attackers died slowly, predictably. The defenders waited, confident. By 1944, Allied doctrine had crystallized around one principle. Air Marshal Arthur Conyngham, commander RAF's 2nd Tactical Air Force, issued the directive that would define Western Front operations. No German armored formation moves during daylight without facing immediate air attack. The rule was simple. Execution was devastating. June 6, 1944, Normandy invasion. The Luftwaffe flew 300 sorties. The Allies flew 14,500. German panzer divisions trying to reach the beachhead were interdicted by rocket-firing Typhoons and Thunderbolts before seeing Allied ground forces. 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, ordered to Normandy from Lisieux on June 6 at 1700, required 3 days to move 120 kilometers. Pre-war planning, 12 hours. Fighter bombers destroyed bridges, strafed columns, forced movement to nighttime only. The mathematics changed everything. Analysis: one P-47 Thunderbolt carried 8 5-inch rockets, each capable of disabling a tank. One squadron of 16 aircraft could engage 128 targets per sortie. Losses to German anti-aircraft, approximately 3% per mission. Cost-benefit ratio favored attackers by orders of magnitude. German responses failed systematically. They tried, moving only at night, eliminated 70% of effective operational time. Dispersal tactics, reduced concentration, eliminated their primary advantage. Aggressive anti-aircraft defense, effective but consumed scarce resources. Technical Officer Hans Kruger, Panzerlehr Division, June 1944. "We captured an American tactical air control manual. They coordinate airstrikes with ground forces through radio networks. Response time from request to bombs on target, 8 minutes.
Our own Luftwaffe requires 4 hours and approval from 3 command levels. The Allies had inverted the German doctrine, where panzers once achieved concentration through motility, Allied air power achieved concentration through omnipresent observation. Every road was watched, every vehicle tracked, every concentration targeted. Soviet doctrine added depth, Allied doctrine added air dominance. Together, the panzer concept became obsolete. Not defeated, obsolete. The attackers couldn't move, couldn't mass, couldn't win.
December 23, 1944. Battle of the Bulge. Germany's final offensive. Hitler had gambled everything on one last panzer thrust. Bad weather grounded Allied aircraft for the first week. Without air cover, American forces reeled backward. The pattern from 1940 reappeared. German tanks racing forward, encircling defenders, creating panic. Then the weather cleared. On December 23rd, Allied air forces flew 1,200 sorties. December 24th, 2,000 sorties. The German 2nd Panzer Division, having advanced closest to the Meuse River, was destroyed from the air within 6 hours. Not defeated, destroyed. The final lesson was complete. Modern armored warfare required 3 elements: mobility, firepower, protection. Panzer doctrine had pioneered the first 2, but the Allies and Soviets discovered something more fundamental: control of depth and air. Soviet defense in depth at Kursk proved that prepared defenses could absorb and exhaust any armored thrust. The 300-kilometer defensive system, over 943,000 mines, 8 defensive belts. These weren't improvisation, they were doctrine. Allied air superiority by 1944 proved that uncontested skies could paralyze ground forces, regardless of armor. The P-47, P-51, Typhoon, and IL-2 changed the tactical calculus permanently. Post-war analysis revealed the pattern. Germany won when enemies gave them single-layer defenses and freedom of movement. They lost when facing depth and air dominance. The doctrinal revolution spread worldwide. NATO Cold War planning, defense in depth combined with air supremacy. Israeli armor doctrine, rapid movement, but only under air cover. American airland battle concept, direct descendant of these principles. Today's combined arms warfare, drones, precision strikes, layered missile defense, follows the same mathematical logic the Soviets calculated in 1943. Attackers must cross kill zones. Defenders who control depth and observation win. The Panzer Revolution wasn't defeated by better tanks. It was defeated by systems that made mobility suicidal. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.